think you'll all get a little message to that effect. So it's only now just to introduce Emily. Emily from the Architectural Heritage Fund. We're delighted that you joined us, Emily. The floor is yours. And I believe you're going to share a presentation and talk to us about the Architectural Heritage Fund.
Great, thank you, Sean. What I'll do is I'll just share my screen first. Is that showing okay? I'll just
that's perfect.
Maximize that. Lovely. Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Really nice to see you all, and thanks ever so much for joining me this morning. So Sean said, my name is Emily Knight. I work for the Architectural Heritage Fund as a programme officer, and I cover the East Midlands, but I also cover Yorkshire and Humber and the North East. I am one of 6 programme officers who cover England, yeah, we're all based from home and cover a number of regions within the country. So just to give you an overview of what I'll talk to you about this morning, the presentation will probably be about 20-25 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers towards the end. But I'll start with an introduction of who we are, so who the Architectural Heritage Fund is, what we do, our kind of main remit and objectives. I will also talk about our loan offer. So we're a fairly kind of unique funder in that we offer both grants and loans. I work on the grant side, so I will caveat this by saying I'm not an expert in loans by any means, but I'm very happy to give you an overview of the loans, and I will, if you do have any specific questions about loans, I will try my very best to answer them, and if not, I'm very happy to introduce you to a member of the investment team who will be much better placed to give you a full and comprehensive answer. So the main focus today will be talking about our current grants programme in England. So it's called Transforming Places Through Heritage. So that will be the bulk of what I'll talk about this morning. And I will include a few case studies of projects that we've funded through that programme so far, and then also leave plenty of time for questions and answers towards the end. So starting off with who we are, who the Architectural Heritage Fund is. So we are a registered charity, and we have been operating and working since the 1970s. During that time, we have offered in the region of £125 million worth of loans, so that equates to about 900 plus projects, and about £14 million worth of grants, so about 1,200 projects for grants. So as you can see, we're a smaller funder compared to someone like the lottery, but we are still distributing significant amounts of money to the sector. I would say that these figures are slightly out of date now, so we have distributed more funding than this, but that kind of gives you a bit of an idea of the kind of scale of funding that we're distributing. And in terms of our sort of main objectives, our aims, we're very much about supporting organisations to conserve and also find new uses for historic buildings. So not only conservation and reuse that will benefit the historic buildings, but also that will benefit the wider community and the communities in which they're based in the UK. So although I work within England, we are a UK-wide charity, so we have staff in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. The way in which we try and achieve our aims is sort of this 4 main strands. So there's advice and support, grants and loans. So we are very much an early stage funder, and I'll go on to this in a little bit, but we tend to be kind of the first port of call for many heritage-led regeneration projects because we give out early stage grants. So we will speak to projects at that very early stage when it may just be kind of an initial idea, and projects just want to kind of have a think about where they start, and so we'll provide quite a lot of advice and support just to help projects to go through that project life cycle essentially. And then we also will provide hopefully financial support in the form of either grants or loans, or perhaps even a combination of the two. And then going on to the loan offer. So we are at the moment, we remain the only specialist lender in the UK for the heritage sector. And we will support charities, other not-for-profit organisations, so it could be a community interest company, a community benefit society, for example, who are based across the UK. And we can fund and help projects with a number of costs. It could be for the acquisition of a building. It could be for capital works, so to help them fund a restoration project. It could be to kickstart some activities that will help to generate some income for the organisation, and then also in turn support the project. In addition to being a charity or a not-for-profit organisation, in order to be eligible, the building needs to be of historic or architectural importance, so either listed or in a conservation area. And if it is neither, sometimes we can fund buildings that are, they can demonstrate there are special significance to the community. So it may be that actually there's lots of memories associated with the building, and although it's not listed or in a conservation area, actually the organisation can demonstrate why it is of heritage significance to the community without kind of an official listing. And the best thing to do is, if you do have a project where you think that could benefit from loan finance, is at the bottom is the link to the inquiry form. So I'm very happy to share the presentation at the end of this session, and you can put an inquiry form in and speak directly to somebody in the investment team just to work out kind of terms and what they might be able to support you with. So the programme that I work on is a grants programme, and this is called Transforming Places Through Heritage. We launched it in September 2019, and it will be running until March next year. So we are now into the final 12 months of the programme. It is part of the wider Future High Streets Fund, and essentially part of the wider government initiative to regenerate high streets and town centres in England. And our specific remit in that is supporting charities, social enterprises, not-for-profits to restore and find new uses for these historic buildings on our high streets and town centres. So at the moment, unfortunately, if you have a project in mind that is not in a high street or in a town centre, unfortunately there isn't any funding from ourselves that we can distribute at this time. We're hoping that that will soon change, and we will have some new funding available for non-high street projects, but unfortunately it's very much focused on high streets and town centres, certainly for the next kind of few months and until we have some new funding. And what we are doing through this project is we are supporting projects to restore these buildings and then also to find new uses for them. And we can support projects at different stages. So from that very initial kind of idea stage, and that will be through a viability grant, which I'll go on to talk about in a little bit, through to a development grant, which is everything kind of prior to the actual bricks and mortar, the capital works of the project. And grants can range from a few £1,000s for an initial viability grant up to £100,000 for development grants. And I provided a link there for the programme guidance, so you can, this is very much a very broad overview of what we're trying to achieve through the programme and how we can help. If you click on that link, there's kind of a good sort of 15 pages worth of guidance there, which you can have a read through, and that's quite helpful. So just focusing on eligibility in a bit more detail. So there's kind of four main things that you would need to demonstrate in order to be eligible for this programme. So firstly, you need to have a project that involves a heritage building, so either listed and or in a conservation area, that's located on a high street or a town centre in England. That town centre or high street in England should be part of a wider place-based regeneration strategy. So I'll go on to talk about that in a little bit. Essentially, we're looking to fund and prioritise funding in areas where there are other things happening. So there are specific schemes that we're looking to fund projects in. And as I say, I think that's on the next slide. So I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Thirdly, you need to be part of a not-for-profit organisation. So there's a list here of the types of organisations that we can fund. So this ranges from community benefit societies through to the lowest form of local government, so a lowest tier of local government, parish and town councils, for example. And then finally, there has to be some sort of significant change as a result of the project, and by this we define this as change of use, so change of primary use or change of ownership. So it's bringing the building from private to community ownership. So although kind of general restoration and repair works, although we recognise these are important, if there isn't change of primary use of the building, either bring it back into use or changing its existing use into something else, unfortunately you'd probably struggle to meet the eligibility criteria there. But these are the four main eligibility criteria that you'd need to hit. And then just sort of talking a little bit more about the place-based initiatives. So as I said, we're looking to fund projects in areas where there are other things going on, where there's other investment into these areas. So these are kind of the main programs, main kind of funds we're looking to sort of partner with, essentially. So there's the Future High Streets Fund, High Street Heritage Action Zones, and the Towns Fund. And I provided links here of essentially a list of all of the areas in which all of the areas that are funded under each of these programmes. So for example, for the Future High Streets Fund, there's 72 locations within the country, and if you click on the link you can see whether or not you're within one of those areas. And there's also kind of more relatively recent funding, so there's the Levelling Up Fund, Community Ownership Fund. So if you're in an area where this investment is, you're benefiting from this investment, then that definitely strengthens the case for us to offer a grant, because it just means we're maximising on that investment. So just, I'll take each of the grants in turn. So we have 4 different types of grants that we can offer through the programme. So firstly, project viability grants. This can be up to £15,000 and we can cover 100% of costs. And so there's no requirement for any partnership funding. We always recommend partnership funding, but if you can't provide it, that's absolutely fine for this type of grants. And this is very much first stages, so it's looking at the different options for reuse, and just working out what condition the building is in, how you might be able to come up with some design solutions with your architect, how much it might cost, what the business case might look like. So it's very much kind of just sort of thinking about all the different options of how this building might be able to be reused and reconfigured. And the main output of this is a project viability report, and there's a link at the bottom there for the template, which is quite a useful template just in terms of seeing the types of work that we can fund as part of this type of grants. This is very much kind of the first sort of grant that we would offer a project if they're just thinking about they've got an initial idea and they're wanting to see whether or not they can take this forward any further. And then assuming that you do have a viable project and you want to develop that from that initial viability stage to the point of basically getting it capital ready, we can also offer funding for project development grants. And that is a significant amount of money, so we can fund up to £100,000, and that is up to 90% of total cost. So we would require at least 10% cash match funding. If you can provide any more, that's great, but it is a minimum of 10%. And this can cover anything from staff costs, project management costs. It could be detailed architect plans. So really kind of further developing what you've done at that viability stage, and taking that so that it's ready to get planning permission, for example. It could be community engagement, just testing out different ideas, doing pop-up events, that sort of thing. And if you do click onto the programme guidance, there's a really helpful list, which is more extensive than this, of the sorts of costs that we can fund through this type of grants. It is very much, it's quite wide ranging. It's worth saying that although you can apply for up to £100,000, this can be done over a number of stages. So although the programme's got about 9 months left, you would still have time potentially to apply for more, kind of 2 project development grants. So just breaking it up over that time, which works for some projects. So it just helps to manage risk, and feels a little bit more manageable to do that in smaller stages. And then the third type of grant we offer is a crowdfunding challenge grants. This is a relatively new kind of venture for the Architectural Heritage Fund. So we haven't done this before the launch of this programme. And we can offer up to £25,000 pound for pound match for anything that's raised through a crowdfunding campaign. So if you were to raise £25,000, we could double that through this programme. And the nice thing about this is that the grant can be used for either development work, so what I've just talked about, or towards capital work, so the actual bricks and mortar of the project, or actually a combination of the two. So there's a real nice flexibility in terms of this type of grant. And one of the positives of this type of grant is that you can really kind of go to town in terms of creativity. You can think about what sorts of incentives you might offer your supporters, and it's a really good way of getting the community on board and helping that long-term sustainability of the projects. That's really what we're trying to essentially sort of trial with this type of grant. And then finally, we offer community share booster grants. So this is only for cooperatives and only for community benefit societies. And so it's quite a niche type of grant, but we can offer up to £50,000, again, like the crowdfunded challenge grant, pound for pound match. And this time it's anything that's raised through a community share scheme. And again, you can use it for development costs or capital costs or a combination of the two. This is actually managed by Co-ops UK, so you would apply directly to them. We essentially give them this funding to distribute, and they would do the assessment and the monitoring of that project, work very closely with them. So that's the fourth type of grant that we can offer through the programme. And then I'm just going to finish with 3 case studies, just to give you an idea of the types of projects we supported so far through the project, through the programme. So firstly, this is on top left is called the Civic Building in Barnsley. It's a lovely late 19th century building, grade 2 listed, right in the middle of the town centre. And there is a High Street Heritage Action Zone there. There is also funding coming through the Future High Streets Fund. And they've had 2 development grants from us. And what they're looking to do is to bring lots of empty spaces back into use that's in the building. So some of the building had been occupied by the local authority and they vacated a couple of years ago. That will now be turned into housing. And they're also looking to reconfigure the theatre and community spaces as well, just to aim to support the long-term sustainability of the building and to ensure that it now it essentially responds to the community's needs, and so that's a really interesting one and exciting one to keep an eye on. And then on a much smaller scale, but no less interesting, is a project just very near Ripon, and this is being led by an organisation called Peacock and Verity Community Spaces. It's essentially an old previously it was a grocer's shop. It's also been an Edwardian tea room, and it's also some of it is lived in currently. Now they have, in terms of their initiatives, they have a much more local plan. So they have a neighbourhood plan. They don't have one of the kind of national sort of schemes that I talked about earlier, such as the Future High Streets Fund. But again, I think hopefully that sort of demonstrates that we can fund projects in areas where there are more local initiatives underway, such as neighbourhood plans. And the way in which we supported this project is with a viability grant and a development grant. And what they're looking to do is turn the building into affordable housing. They're going to have it as a flexible space for the community, so a place where they can teach and it can be rented out by community groups. So yeah, quite different to the Barnsley project, but really interesting and very much, again, responding to the community's needs and what they would like the building to be used as. And then this building is probably a bit closer to home. So St. Peter and the Old Black Lion in Northampton. So we unfortunately can't fund places of worship. By places of worship, or active places of worship, that is, we mean a building that is used for services more than 6 times a year. But this is a partnership project that's being led by the Church's Conservation Trust, and they are looking to bring the pub, so the Old Black Lion, back into use, and that is the element that we're funding. So it's a 17th century pub, grade 2 listed. Northampton is in receipt, as you may be aware, of Future High Streets funding, Towns funding, and we are funding the pub with a development grant and also capital funding. So it will turn back into a pub, because at the moment it's just vacant, but there will also be training spaces. So this is for bell ringers, I believe, and then also offices and hot desking space. So it's a real kind of mix of uses within that building. And the idea is that will help and be a resource to the church next door, so that the pub will support the long-term sustainability of the church, and likewise the church will support the long-term sustainability of the pub. So it's a really interesting partnership model, that one. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for listening. And I'll stop sharing, and happy to answer any questions. My contact details are there if you want to get in touch with me directly.
Emily, thank you. We're all enlightened and know far more than we ever thought was there to know about the resources that you bring to helping to bring back buildings into community use. Great stuff. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but we're a small group. Is there anything anyone would like to ask of Emily, or any comments? Just stick your paw in the air or use the emoji reactions that you can to stick your hand up. Leslie, hi Leslie.
Hi Sean, thank you. I work for Northants Calc, which looks after town and parish councils in Northamptonshire. And I'm thinking about assets of community value that sometimes towns and parishes identify. And if there's a sale mooted, they have the 6-month period where they can try and generate some cash. Are there any deadlines that parishes should be aware of applying to yourselves for a grant? So would they be able to do that within the 6 months, or do you only decide on grants every 3 to 4 months, say?
So yes, we have a quarterly cycle of decisions. So we have deadlines. Next deadline would be the end of July, and then it'll be kind of every 3 months after that. And then the decisions are, so the next decision is the end of this month. So if you were to hit the July deadline, it would be a September decision. And then I guess it would be a September deadline for then a November, December decision. It's always a bit funny around Christmas. So yes, there is a quarterly kind of deadline cycle to be aware of. And then what we can do is, it depends on the level of funding that they'd be looking for. So at the viability stage, we can be quite flexible in terms of ownership. So essentially what we'd need to see is, if they're looking for a viability grant, that they'd have a reasonable prospect of securing the building. So it's just ensuring that nothing's going to happen to the building whilst they carry that viability work out. So it could be a letter of intent from the owner, for example. Anything after that for a development grant, there would need to be more of a formal agreement in place. But if it's at that very early stage when they're looking to raise those funds, there might be flexibility to them. If they're able to get a letter from the owner or something similar, we can try and be quite flexible and hopefully support them there. But yes, I can certainly send, I can include the link for the deadlines in the presentation. So when I send that round, then you'll have that.
That'd be great, thank you.
Great. Anything else from anybody? Okay, so I was interested, you've got a Northampton example, but several of the areas across the county are in levelling up, or are in action zones, or are getting included variously in these zones that you described that are enablers to get access, aren't there?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'll be very honest and say the East Midlands is, so I cover the three regions, and the East Midlands is the area that I get the fewest applications from. As someone who came from Nottingham, it's somewhere that is, somewhere very close to my heart. So I'd love more projects from the East Midlands. But it is, although there is, funding going into the area, I don't have as many projects from that area. So it would be great if, just about kind of raising awareness of us, and we are a relatively small funder compared to someone like the Lottery or Arts Council or whoever, but there is funding to be had. So if there are any projects, I'm very happy to speak to people about them, and do feel free to give me a ring or drop me an email. But there's lots of schemes going on in Northampton or Northamptonshire and the wider East Midlands for sure.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, folks, you've met Emily. You know how approachable she is, so I'm sure she'd welcome a chat if you want to be in touch with her to just explore the art of the possible. Right. Okay, folks. We schedule this for an hour, but never with the anticipation that it will be a full hour. So I don't know if you're booked in for other sessions with us over the next few days, but you can look at the schedule and you can book in. My colleagues at Northampton Council are keeping an eagle eye on the email. So if anyone wants to join last minute to a group, they're very able to. So Emily, thanks so much for kicking us off with the most interesting presentation. And thanks all of you for joining us. As I mentioned, we've been recording. The session will be uploaded to the website. Please remember to complete the online questionnaire and include your email if you'd like to be entered into the prize draw. So I'm just going to stop recording.